Yep, exactly 7.
So we must walk.
Yep.
Good evening. I'd like to welcome everyone to our meeting. In accordance with the requirements of the open meeting law, please be advised that this meeting is being recorded and broadcast over the Lunenburg Public Access Channel. Would you please join us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I guess you probably do want to announce that your budget presentation to the Finance Committee is going to be on February 13th.
Yes.
I want to make sure everybody tunes into that. Any public comment from the board?
No.
Any public comment from the public before we get started? This is a public meeting to discuss the 5-year forecast in the FY 2021 capital plan. The town manager has made several presentations of this material already, so she's not going to go through it all because I think everyone here has been in attendance at least one of those sessions. So she's not going to summarize. We're going to open it up for public comment right away. This is an unusual meeting and we're here to listen.
Evening. My name is Peter Beardmore. I live at 282 Pleasant Street. And I'm here tonight as a homeowner and taxpayer, parent of 2 school-age children, both of whom are enrolled in the Lunenburg schools, and a town meeting participant who last year ran into some frustrations that motivated me to volunteer to become a member of the Finance Committee. And so tonight, while I'm speaking for myself, I'm speaking from those 3 positions.
Hang on a second. Can everyone hear him?
Yeah,
fine?
yes.
Great.
Okay, thank you. I prepared some comments tonight, and frankly, I was first motivated to prepare them after listening to Mrs. Luck's comments last week, after the portion of the school department budget was presented. I wrote down a number of her comments, and I was pretty angry about it, quite frankly. And I was offended. But I've decided I'm not going to read them back to you and pontificate about it, but rather I'd like to talk to you about why I think it was important to include the school department's 5-year projection as it was presented last week. Last year's budget included disproportionate increases to several departments, reflecting, quote, unwritten policies, using the language of the town manager, that had been arrived at by data-driven analysis of long-term demographic trends and needs identified by department heads. Meanwhile, just as our brand new superintendent was identifying and reporting on emerging trends and needs that needed to be addressed through thoughtful strategic planning, we found ourselves contemplating cuts to core programs while flexing more resources to emerging urgent needs that had to be dealt with within the current year's budget. And I found this dichotomy troubling. And immediately after town meeting, I volunteered for the FinCom. And what I found is a lack of any rationalization between these 2 approaches: the strategic needs of the school department and the existing 5-year forecast until last week's presentation. Since that time, the school committee has taken into account a lot of the observations and a lot of the data that's been presented by the superintendent and the administration, and they adopted a strategic plan and overlaid that strategic plan with a resource plan commensurate with that plan. what we need to do to accomplish what we believe we need to accomplish to meet the needs and expectations of the parents and residents in town. And this strategy addressed the changing conditions and needs and gaps that had been identified by the superintendent. As a member of the Finance Committee, I had 3 primary requests this year that I asked the Finance Committee and, by extension, the School Committee to look at. The first eventually became the symposium that we did last fall, where we all get to kind of look at this long term. It wasn't exactly my initial request, but that's what we eventually came to. The second was inclusion of the school department's forecasted needs together with the town manager's forecast. Again, as a budgeting tool, so that we could think about and think creatively about how we can meet and resource the needs of the entire town government. And lastly, I asked for synchronization of the school department and finance committee budget processes, because last year they were out of sync. And the finance committee ultimately recommended during their process approval of a budget that hadn't been fully considered and approved by the school committee at the time. And I think that we all ought to come together and come up with something that we can mutually agree to and recommend. Now, as Mrs. Luck and Mr. Rogers at last week's school committee meeting have pointed out, our demographics in Lunenburg are changing. We're getting older as a population, but simultaneously our school-age demographics are also changing in Lunenburg. And the needs and services of the children that are attending the Lunenburg schools are changing, and they need to be dealt with. They're not necessarily the most urgent needs, and some of them will not be dealt with in this year's or next year's budget. But the lack of adhering to a strategic plan and resourcing it accordingly is kicking the can down the road. And eventually, these needs that are not being met are going to come back to haunt us in terms that are measurable outcomes. But back to the aging population in Lunenburg. Zillow published a study last fall that was republished in the Wall Street Journal and several other business publications around the country. And it was called the Silver Tsunami. And what it referred to was the housing stock that is about to become available as a result of people over the age of 60 selling their homes in the next 2 decades. In the last decade, there were 730,000 houses released into housing stock by people over 60. In the next decade, that number will be 1.17 million. More pointedly, where we live, in the area of Boston, Worcester, and Providence, the portion of houses that will come from family or people over 60 selling their houses will go from 11% of the current housing stock to 26.4% of the current housing stock, more than doubling as people are leaving their homes. Now think for a moment about what that's going to do to property values, and think for a moment about how we are going to market our town and our properties to families who are looking to buy houses. Now let's say I'm a millennial looking to buy a home, move out of an urban environment in 4 or 5 years, and I'm looking at school departments in towns that are in more rural and suburban settings. And a town like Lunenburg has been kicking these strategic needs, kicking that can down the road for 4, 5, 6 years. We haven't addressed some of the behavioral issues and psychological issues that have been identified by some of our younger school-age children. There was a study that came out of the school department a few weeks ago that said that 20% of the students in our high school don't feel as if they belong in that high school. Now, these are not issues that can be dealt with by hiring a new math teacher necessarily, right? These are strategic problems that need to be dealt with thoughtfully. And we need to figure out how to resource these issues. Perhaps not to the 7% a year rates that were in that forecast, but there are things that we need to be taken seriously. And there are issues that cannot be dismissed or made fun of or laughed at. We need to think creatively and seriously about these issues and how we're going to balance these needs with all of the other needs that we have to address in Lunenburg. And I grant you that they're all legitimate needs. And I think that we can do so. We can be creative and we can be thoughtful about how we do this. You know, our debt service is going to go down over the next several years. We don't need to go and replace all of that debt service with new debt service. We could perhaps take some of that money that we would otherwise be spending and spend that directly on capital outside of the Prop 2.5 levy. I mean, there are things that we could do. These are discussions that we need to have, but we have to have them in an informed, transparent manner that is not dismissive of the needs, regardless of the price tag, that certain departments have in this town. Thank you for your time.
My name is Dave Rogers. I live at 82 Highland Street. My friend Peter made some compelling points. And where I come out is as follows. The presentation by the school department, to me, was, and I don't mean to be crass about this, but it was like a wish list. This is what, you know. And let me tell you why I say that. Because I think I heard the superintendent say, when she was talking to the Board of Selectmen, that, of course, they didn't think that they were going to get all of this all of the time. And if that's the case, how do we differentiate between what is real and what is pie in the sky? The second point that I want to make is on the, quote, town side. And that is that the town manager put together what I consider to be a management-based analysis of what their best guess is, what they need, and how that will be financed, and the revenues that will be generated to afford those various changes. At the end of the day, and this is a process, as the guy says, this isn't my first rodeo. I mean, I've seen 40 of these. So it's really kind of preliminary, but from my perspective, I think what's lacking in the presentation that the school made was how their wants and desires and programs and needs were going to be financed. I mean, and you know, obviously I come from a business background, but you know, if you ever did this in the places I've worked, they'd say, well, what are you, cuckoo? I mean, where are we going to get the money? How are we going to do this? Okay? And to Peter's point, these are some strange times. Families, for whatever reason, are facing all kinds of problems, and you know, they have to be dealt with. But the point that I want to make is we've got to have a balance. It can't be skewed all one way or another way. It's got to be balanced out, and as Peter said, it's got to be thoughtful. And there's no such thing as a unrealistic kind of a situation. Let's kick it around and see what we can do, okay? But I'll tell you, when I was at home and I saw that, and I didn't do the math, but it's got to be somewhere between 30 to 40% of an increase over that period of time. And I think my numbers are in the ballpark anyway. When you look at what we spend in the town of Lunenburg for schools and school-related facilities, et cetera, it's darn near 65% of the budget. So it's not like we're not doing what we should do, and we will continue, I'm sure, to face up to the responsibilities, and we'll come to grips with what we have. But without bringing forth a balanced approach to this, I think it's an exercise in futility, okay? Again, Pete alluded to the fact that the demographics are changing, and they certainly are. And the example that was used a while ago was, it's too bad that we can't guarantee folks, that their kids can be educated through the school system, et cetera, et cetera. But I understand that. But it's equally as disturbing to me to see folks who have lived here a long time and want to stay here, for more years, being pushed out because they can't. So somehow or another, we've got to bridge that gap so that we can hopefully do as best we can for the younger generation and the older guys. I'd be remiss if I didn't, tell you that I'm really disappointed that we don't have any members of the school committee here. I thought that this was going to be a situation where we could ask questions and set up a dialogue, and there's nobody here to talk to about these things. So it's one more example that I think, needs to be rectified. And I was at a school committee a while ago, and they said, what can we do to get more people involved? Show up so we can ask you some questions, so you can tell us what you're going to do, what you think, what's best, etc. A lot that was said by the previous speaker, I never knew about. I didn't know about the stuff that the 20% in the school classes that that don't feel welcome, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we've got a lot of work to do. But the bottom line is that if we can't pay for it, it's not going to go. I don't think. Okay, thank you for your time.
Town manager, Madam Chair, to the town manager. My understanding is that I know the school committee had a meeting tonight at 6. Are we expecting the superintendent to be here tonight?
Yes. Yep.
All right.
I'm assuming she's running behind because of that meeting. Yep. Right.
Okay, so she's running late, and thank you.
Sure.
Steve Weaver, 288 Holman Street. I've listened to the school committees, I've listened to the finance committee meetings, I've listened to the selectmen's meetings. As a taxpayer and a homeowner in town, and I think that the budgets are really overstated. I think that, if we ran our homes with a budget and we projected that, there was going to be 40% more expenses during the next 5 years, I think that's bad budgeting. I think that, I think the school system does a good job. There's a lot of graduates from Lunenburg that have turned out pretty good. And in years past too. So I think that, maybe we don't need all of that. And I go along with Dave, and I think that the select board, all of you stated that you thought that it was overpriced. I know Tom did, I know Michael did, I know Phyllis and Katie all did. So I think that, it's just too much. I run a business, and I could never do that by adding so much overhead of 40%. And it was forecasted that there was going to be 20 students more a year for the next 5 years. And with that amount of money that's being forecasted, That's about $500,000 an added student, you know? I just don't get it. Thank you.
Carl Luck, 50 Sunset Lane in Lunenburg. Yeah, first, the 5-year plan can be an extremely important tool. I've been in this town a long time. I've seen a lot of 5-year plans. Unfortunately, I've... Come a little closer, Dave. Unfortunately, I've never seen them used, and I hope this year is going to be different, especially since we see this huge range, with the school's needs. Historically, we've done them and we put them in the file, and next week we move on to the budget and we never look back. This is a tool we need to use because we have some big issues coming. Whether the school's plan is good, bad, or indifferent, it certainly identifies a serious problem that we have and that we've got to deal with appropriately. We advertise this budget, and it's always been this way. It's nothing against the current town manager. It's always advertised and intended to be a conservative 5-year plan. It's pretty clear to me that the revenues are conservative. That's clear. The expenses are the opposite of conservative in my mind. A 5-year plan in this town that doesn't have one extra head count or one extra hour for an employee, I don't think is conservative. I think it's extremely aggressive and probably not realistic. A 5-year plan that has no new debt is not conservative. It's overly aggressive that could ever possibly happen in this town. And in 1 year, in between 2003 and 2023 and 2024, our debt is reduced by $1 million. And that falls to the bottom line in this make-believe analysis. So it looks like you have another $1 million of revenue. Well, I'm pretty sure by that time we're going to have, hopefully we're going to have decided what to do with some of these buildings, and we're going to be needing some debt service. So that $1 million is not going to fall to the bottom line. I think also, whether you accept it or not, allocating 2.5% for schools, maybe you could do that 1 year. I'm not sure I've ever seen it done in my time here. But you sure can't do it 5 years in a row, not with the kind of information that the school is telling us. So even our base, without the school on top, even our base, I think meets the criticality point where it according to the only view graphs here, that the forecast, that there's a shortfall of the forecast, which, according to our plan here, should result in some action being taken, or at least a plan. So I hope, as we go forward, there is an intention not to put this 5-year plan on the shelf, but to keep it alive, start doing some of the what-ifs, make it more realistic, make it a tool that's usable by putting some assumptions in, and we can put assumptions in for debt service. We know it's not going to go to zero. We hope it's not going to stay at 11% because the financial people don't like that. So pick a number, maybe 8-9%. If it was 9%, then the 5-year plan without the schools is $1.5 million short in the 5th year. I think that's a problem that should be looked at, and should be looked at now, because in this budget season, we're going to start making some decisions that are going to affect this 5-year plan. And chances are they're going to make it worse. And without a model that we can plug these numbers in, we're not going to have a tool in order to be able to come up with the discussions of how are we going to fund it, where's the money going to come from, or how are we going to reduce the costs, as opposed to wait until budget time and saying, oh my God. I'm very disappointed, and I hope it's just a timing issue that my request to get access to the Excel files for these documents hasn't been agreed to yet, because without that, it's easy to do a bunch of what-ifs. Any member of the community can do that understands Excel, and start this work, and it's an important tool. So I hope that's still coming. I'll request in advance access to the Excel tools for the budget, because it's even more important there. And without those tools, you can't really understand and really focus in on where the issues are. It's just too confusing. So I hope I hope I will be able to get access to those Excel tools. Again, so I hope we can do this, because, we really do have a shortfall according to this plan, which isn't complete. We have a shortfall of $1.5 million by the 5th year without the schools, and we have a shortfall of $5 million with the schools. We got a lot of work to do, and I hope it can continue not just during this period, but through the year. And I hope that the residents can get access to the files and to the equations and inputs, so that the residents can do their own homework and ask intelligent questions based on, that are data-driven. So, thank you.
Dave Passios, 56 Whiting Street. This past weekend, I had the pleasure of attending the Mass Mutual Association's annual meeting in Boston, and spent the better part of 2 days talking with other Finance Committee members from all over the state, town administrators. It's a great networking opportunity that I'm really glad I took advantage of. All the cities and towns in Massachusetts have very much the same issues as we do, more or less larger numbers in big cities and wealthy towns, and very similar towns with our demographic and our type of budget are very much the same as the position we're in. The two major things that came out of the discussions that I had with different groups was that, number one, we need to look outside the box for the ways to get these budgets under control, and had a very extensive conversation with one town administrator about collective bargaining and the way they have dealt with constantly escalating costs for collective bargaining agreements, and a very interesting way that they approached it. It's going to take them 10 to 15 years to actually realize a good savings from it. But basically what they did was they grandfathered all of the employees under the present contract, and then made drastic changes to the step levels and the incoming pay and the top level steps, and leveled that curve off. And like I say, it will take 10 to 15 years through attrition to realize all of that savings, but I thought that was a great way to get the cost under control, but it's over time. Thank you.
Did you know when the superintendent would be here?
There's someone on the steps.
Right now.
Approximately 7.
Does anyone have any questions for the superintendent now that she's here?
She said she wants to take her coat off and sit down.
Too late for that.
So while you were, I guess I'll kind of summarize a little bit here of what I've heard so far tonight. So there seems last week's presentation, tonight's comment so far, what you've missed, and I think that they'll stand up and ask you some questions. But Mr. Bidmore spoke very eloquently tonight and really emphasized the needs of the schools that you guys are facing, and I'm summarizing here, but you guys are facing some dynamic changes in your population, dynamic challenges with what the schools are expected to do these days beyond just academics, and that plan that is now in sync with better budgeting practices is going to cost more money, and that we need to think about the end states here that we're trying to achieve and figure out how we're going to get there, and that we can't keep kicking the can down the road. Was that a fair, quick summary?
Better than that.
All right. we've also heard other comments from other members, just about everyone else who spoke. They're really concerned about the cost of the plan. Primarily, as you look at 5 years, how are we funding this? Where are we going to get this money from? And that seems to be, the affordability portion of this seems to be the other overriding concern tonight. So I expect that you'll probably hear questions about that. Mr. Rogers, Mr. Weaver spoke to that, and then also Mr. Passio's raised some concerns, really I think directed towards us, about finding some different avenues to reorganize within our own government, and of course, find new sources of revenue.
But also collective bargaining. The
Yes.
school certainly is in a negotiation for the teacher's contract.
Yep.
That's the biggest bargaining unit in the town by far.
It is.
So it has the biggest impact on the town's budget.
And one key point that I think that I heard tonight is when you look at the costs of the schools, that, roughly it's about 65% of the budget, roughly. Now, you have the actual cost of the schools, but I think Mr. Rogers' assessment of that, as I know from previous conversation with him, accounts for the cost of the school that aren't in the school line, such as all the retirement benefits, for retired teachers, healthcare, et cetera. Is that a fair assessment for the board of where we're at? Okay.
Can I make one?
Absolutely.
My earlier comments of the...
We're here to listen. Come on up.
Dave Passios again, 56 Whiting Street. The comments I made a few minutes ago about collective bargaining were not directed specifically at the schools, because those types of changes and leveling out the curve accomplishes a couple of things that the fire department's struggling with, DPW is struggling with, and that is, it brings up the starting pays on the lower end. And it takes some off the top, but it brings that starting pay up a little bit higher, so that if you don't hire somebody in 3, 6, 12 months later, when they've got a little bit of experience under their belt, they get another opportunity that takes them away because they can get more money.
Well, that's the same in the teacher's contract. The incoming teachers make less.
Right, oh, yeah.
Teachers at the end make way more.
Right.
Probably, that should be leveled out, in my opinion.
Right, no, but I mean, that process is appropriate for a number of different reasons across collective
Yes.
bargaining.
Yes.
Thank you. What I would add, though, Selectman Luck, just as a comment, that there is probably a difference when it comes to the schools, because it seems to be that most teachers don't want to move around very often, that they want to find a community to work in for a long period of time,
Right.
and that they are looking at what are teachers who've been here for 15, 20 years making, and they're willing to hold on to that, whereas a police is different, because you have to get someone that's willing to hire you, willing to train you, and everyone will hire a already trained police officer, whereas, and that's, to me, I think that the other departments, I see schools as being a little different in that category.
I see the schools as different, but a 22, 23-year-old teacher is not looking at what am I going to make in retirement. She's looking at her incoming salary.
Yeah.
And when I worked in education, our school had difficulty hiring top-quality teachers because because the teachers that did the collective bargaining were the teachers who'd been in school for a long time, so they were giving more money to the teachers who had been there for a long time, and they weren't concerned with paying incoming teachers. And so the discrepancy was, the school was unable to hire really first-quality teachers at the beginning because they didn't have the money, because all of the money was going at the other end. And I believe it's a similar situation in Lunenburg,
Yep.
from what I've looked at the contract.
I understand what you're saying now.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Sure, come on up. That's what we're here for.
I don't feel comfortable talking about collective bargaining units and situations, because it's really out of my purview, so I'm not going to address that point. Having said that, while you were at your other meeting this evening, and I'm just going to, I'm going to give a little constructive criticism. It would have been nice had someone from your office contacted a member of the Board of Selectmen, or even Mr. Cassidy got up and said, the superintendent is at another meeting and she'll be along when that meeting is over, rather than, we didn't know. So I think that we need to communicate better in that regard, because I, for one, was concerned that it's supposed to be a dialogue and there's nobody to talk with.
I know that my secretary, the town manager's secretary, know that I had another meeting.
Okay, well, that wasn't conveyed or whatever, at least I didn't know. Anyway, I made the point that the 5-year budget, so-called, to me, was more of a spending plan rather than a management plan or how we were going to get someplace. And I made reference to the fact about the 21 people that were in that queue, and I think I quoted you correctly, and please, if I didn't, correct me. I thought you said at the Board of Selectmen's meeting that you really didn't have any idea that you'd get all that you were looking for. This was just something that was going the process. Is that fair?
No, I think,
You should actually, the people at home can't hear you, so you're really going to have to come up to the microphone.
Do you want to join us?
Stay right here. This would be good for the ledger. No, really. Hey, so how you doing?
I think just to provide a little bit of clarity. I think that we all recognize that while we were asked to put together a 5-year staffing plan to achieve the goals that we've laid out for the school department over the next 3 to 5 years, we're very realistic about the fact that the town has limited revenue. We recognize that this may not actually end up being a 5-year plan. It may be pushed out a bit more to a 6, 7, 8-year plan. The caveat for us is that it's really hard for us to project staffing needs long-term, because the needs of the students that come in they're always changing. So what we identify as a potential need today, based on data trends, may not actually be realized even 4 years from now. So positions that we anticipate, if the trend continues, are in that plan. But if the need isn't there based on student enrollment, some of those positions would never be posted and filled. There are other positions that we feel that we need to get in place to have a more stable structure, key leadership to guide the work that needs to be done in some key areas in the district. But there are positions that were in that 5-year plan based on
What you know today.
what we know today, and what, if the trend continues this way, what might we need? So while it looks
Ominous.
it does. We know that. We know that.
She said ominous.
It's a big ticket when you look at it, right? The challenge for us is that we try to identify what we know we need to deliver a quality education, things that have been missing for a while. We have some work to do to kind of catch us up. But there are also positions in there that really are going to be enrollment driven. And if we don't see the shift in that profile, as an example, if we don't see an increase or continued increase in our English language learner enrollment, we don't need to hire another English language learner teacher.
Can I ask a question? Are
Sure.
there positions that you have now that you don't need or won't need? I mean, if your needs are changing, it makes sense to me that some positions you don't really need, and those people can be cross-trained and, fill in other.
So I can tell you right now, absolutely no. The district's been running pretty lean for a number of years. If there were a need for something over here, and as an example, I might need a French teacher. I can't necessarily transition somebody who's licensed to do something else into the role that I need. You have to have the right license. Now, that said, if we're no longer going to offer CAD programming and other things that really are relevant for children's education today, if they're going to go into a STEM field, architecture, those kinds of things, that kind of a course is very beneficial. It's very relevant today. But let's say we were at a point where that was no longer relevant. Yeah, I could reduce that FTE and hire the FTE that we need. But I can tell you that, looking in the district, we had to cut positions last year. That was a really difficult experience for all of us, because at one point we were talking about having to reduce teachers in the foreign language department and reduce offerings to students at the late middle high school years. Currently we offer 3 different foreign languages: Spanish, French, and Latin. And our Latin program is very highly enrolled. We were thinking we would have to reduce to 2 offerings and phase out over time one of the programs.
Aren't some of those programs, don't they just have a very few students?
So our French, if you look purely at numbers, the French numbers are low. But the community weighed in last year, and they really wanted to see the French program maintained.
I know, but we've talked about this before. When you keep that, you have first graders with 25 kids in the class. I mean...
No, I get it. I get it.
The school system has to come to grips with that, that when you have, when the primary grades are too big, you end up with reading problems. You end up with more kids in special ed because they don't get the quality instruction
that they need
when they're little. And if you can't afford to have that and 3 people in a French class in high school, you've got to make that tough decision.
Oh, absolutely. No doubt about that. We're looking at possible ways to reconstruct different pathways in foreign language to see if there's an option.
Can't you do a lot of it in the language lab?
No, that would not be a comparable experience.
I don't think your mic is working.
Oh, sorry.
Imagine that, Carl, they can't hear her.
I mean, it just isn't fair.
No, I don't disagree. But we also, the school committee is trying to be responsive to what the community wants to see offered programmatically in their school district. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we won't have to revisit that same discussion this budget cycle, next budget cycle. We know that there are hard decisions that have to be made, and that we're not going to be able to provide everything for everyone.
Right.
The crux of my concern was to create a balance. So we've got to pay for that which we project. And the way, and don't quote me exactly on these numbers, but the way it works out, without the school's projection, Mr. Lux said that they were like $1 million shy in year 5. And with the schools, it's about $5 million, okay? So to have all of this out there and no way to pay it, to me is an exercise in futility. I mean, it's unacceptable. So we've got to come to grips with this, and that to me is very important. Now, Obviously, I'm not an educator, and I don't know that much about it, but it would seem to me that there still is a lot of unfunded mandates. Okay? So what is the superintendent's group, the school committee group, the teachers group doing to say, hey, enough's enough, we can't do this, okay? That's got to happen. In terms of trying to be creative, I mean, we've got Fitchburg State University. Is there something that we can do there to give the students an opportunity to take advanced courses? Are there things that we can be creative to maybe not do it the way we would like to do it, but to do it the best we can? And I know that, is kind of a cavalier saying, but, the problem is, I don't see how we can go with a plan that isn't documented and just cut to the bone and to make sure that things happen. The people just won't go for it. So the flip side of this, well, let's get an override. Good luck.
No, I know.
Good luck, okay? And
That's when people show up
but
and
if that's
vote.
what we have to do, let's get it on. Let's get it on and see what the people say, and let's move on. But I don't think that's a possibility. Closing. We all have got to work together in this.
Definitely.
Okay? We may not all agree, like, I'm not going to vote for a certain person for president, but those that happen to be my friends that like that certain person, I'm still going to talk to them. But the point is, this is a townwide problem, we've got to take care of this.
Agreed.
And so if we can do whatever we can to get this, but, and the last thing, and I promise, I really am looking for more involvement from the school committee. They are our elected representatives. We hire you, you report to them. I want more involvement from them. And I, for the life of me, don't understand, but that's okay, why at least one of them couldn't be here tonight so that we could talk. And I know that you can't answer, but I'm interested in a dialogue, to talk, not to just come in and say, well, we'll see you, bye. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice to see you. I hope you vote on that Senate Bill number 9.
So just to address something quickly, the Mass Association of School Superintendents does work diligently on our behalf in terms of, equity in education, funding for education, and so on. Relative to the unfunded mandates, we have a new commissioner who has, stated in several public forums that he's looking to reduce the burden on districts with all of the mandates, particularly unfunded mandates. I think that's going to take a little bit of time to be realized. So we'll see where that goes. As far as being creative, we absolutely are. We have things that come up during the course of a year, as we had this year. Not in a position to hire additional positions to address the need in terms of teaching positions. So we did our very best to sort of reassign the staff that we have in a different way to better meet the needs of the students, because we're operating within the budget that we have. So we definitely do that. We definitely do that. And again, it's difficult for us to have a real accurate projection for you around the staffing needs. Those things are going to shift and change, and I can appreciate that it's frustrating not to be able to have a concrete, plan for staffing, what we're going to absolutely need year 2, year 3, and on down the road. And we realize that there's a lot in that 5-year plan, and it may actually be a 6 or a 7-year plan. And we'll, every single year, based on what we know, we will reprioritize that list. Things that we may think might be able to wait until year 3, we might get to year 2 and feel that that's a more urgent need. We need to have that position in year 2. We'll have to push something else out. We do an awful lot of creative problem solving. I just, I have to give credit to the entire leadership team. They all do come together, and we absolutely try to do the best we can with the resources that we have to meet the needs that are in front of us any given day.
So what do you project your minimum increase to be?
I can't even say what you mean for next year?
Yeah,
So the budget that was presented last week was a 4% increase. That is an accurate number that you have in the 5-year plan right now, because we were able to, prior to the town manager actually putting this report together, we had been working as a leadership team to really prioritize what the needs were that would go into a budget request for next
So
year.
if you're
So
looking-
that's an accurate reflection of what's
So what will
being asked
you,
in the budget.
what will you be able to cut to get down to 3%? I mean, if you get 4% and
Yep.
we only get 2.5,
Yep.
the people that you say you depend on and all the other departments, you're asking them to make cuts and do without so that you can have 4%. So how can you reduce that?
We presented that as well. One of the positions that we identified that we put into the FY21 budget was an assistant principal, so that we can have an assistant principal in the Turkey Hill and in the primary school. Some of the needs, many of the needs, the high priority need really is around supporting students with behavioral supports.
So the assistant principal will be a behavioral specialist?
So there's a stable staff in the building 5 days a week. So right now,
But I mean,
The
how
people-
does the assistant principal help with the behavioral issues?
because they're part of the response team to engage when students are having a difficult time. So right now, the people who sort of fill those functions are your school psychologist. We have one that is split between Turkey Hill and the primary. Your behavior analysts, we have one that is split between the Turkey Hill and the primary. We have an assistant principal who is split between the Turkey Hill and the primary. And as I said, students don't kind of put their bad day on hold until the building is staffed to be able to support them, right? Many of the children, maybe not in every case, but in many cases, these children are responding behaviorally because emotionally, they don't know how to articulate that any other way. They're young. Many of these kiddos are coming to us from a background where there's been some trauma. Trust oftentimes is an issue for these children. So to have a revolving door of faces that they're interacting with is not optimal. It really is not. We might be more impactful, more effective in meeting the needs of these children if they had a stable, steady team of professionals in the building 5 days a week.
Now, many years ago, students that present with behavioral concerns would be referred to out-of-district placement. And my understanding is that the cost of out-of-district placement now is astronomical. And because the positions you're mentioning are things that historically were provided out-of-district, but it's looking as if you're finding a solution to do this internally to keep students within the district. And just for our own benefit, what is the cost of sending a student out-of-district for a school like a Perkins in Lancaster?
What's the low end? Yeah, that's at the low end.
The low end.
There are other placements that would be closer to 100,000.
Yeah, I've heard things of 200,000.
Yeah.
But also inject, though, that I don't think that a lot of the behavioral needs are really at that level anyways, though.
No.
Like the needs you need
Yeah,
in
right,
school
right.
are for children that are many of them are highly manageable in town, but need assistance.
If we can provide them the strategies they need to better manage themselves, and that really is not your classroom teacher that's going to provide them those skills.
But to me, it doesn't sound like it's an assistant principal either. I mean,
it's part of it,
it's
because
more
some of it
behavioral
is-
specialist. I mean, I don't really, one more administrator drives me crazy.
Well, I actually really need one more administrator. I really do. I actually need two more. I would really like to see an assistant principal in each of the schools. And that means even at the middle high school, one for the middle school, one for the high school. The reporting burdens that are...
You know, that was one thing they sold us on.
I understand
The middle
that.
high school was, you're not going to need all of those sets of people, and
And I can tell you that the demands, the time spent on a single evaluation for a teacher, right? There's more time demanded for evaluation of teachers who are still in their first 3 years in the district. There's an even greater burden, commitment of time from the administrator. If you have a teacher that isn't effective and is working on an improvement plan, those hours alone are extraordinary. At the middle high school, as an example, things can happen on social media over the weekend that trickles into the school, and the minute that somebody raises that issue, we have to begin an investigation. Now you're talking about interviewing sometimes more than a dozen students who have been named either by the original complaint or through interviewing other students. You have to follow that through to completion. Then there's the writing of the report. There's a lot of time spent on things that we have to do. We have to do them. It's a little bit of that compliance. It's the data tracking for students with behavior issues. All of that needs to be tracked and reported to the state.
yeah, but the assistant principal isn't doing that. Can't you have a secretary do that?
No. Because these people have the first-hand knowledge because they were interacting with the child, not the secretary. So they're the ones that have to file the report.
So
Additionally,
the assistant principals are the ones that are interacting with the
the job
students?
has changed. The job has changed. These assistant principals also are going to be handling any discipline that comes out of an incident, even with the little ones, communicating with the families, meetings with the families. There's an awful lot about the job that has changed. I can appreciate that, a handful of years ago, the plan was you could reduce administration, having them shared at the middle high school. I can tell you based on the demands, it really is not sufficient. But I can further advocate for the fact that it is not effective to meet the needs of the children when you have critical positions to address those needs that are bouncing back and forth between two buildings. We're not meeting the needs of the kids. We don't have stable staffing to address those needs. We don't.
You have a question?
I think there's been a productive discussion so far, but I would like to remind the committee that the agenda for tonight is to discuss the 5-year forecast and the FY21 capital plan. So I think we should be very careful about moving into FY21 budget. They're two different issues, and I think we should be a little bit careful about it. Just a couple of comments. To your point, Mr. Jeffries, you mentioned out-of-district placement, which I think is very valid to the topic that was being discussed. We're also not living in a bubble. The points that you made, Mrs. Luck, about the elementary grades and the primary grades are absolutely true. But we have a phenomenon of school choice and charter schools in Massachusetts now. And we have virtually no control over students that choose to go to a charter school or another public school through school choice, which is taking money directly out of our pockets and putting it in another district. And if we do not have programs at the high school that are competitive with the other districts, then we get to pay that bill. And we have no choice about it, no oversight, no nothing. It becomes very non-democratic. So it's another reason to be thinking about this in terms of how we're going to remain competitive in our school district.
It is, I'm really tempted to ask a lot of questions, but I know that we will have multiple opportunities in the future, so I don't want to take time away from other people. But I will comment probably later on tonight.
Steve Weaver, 288 Holman Street. It seems that there's an awful lot of behavior issues. And, I mean, is this something that has been going on for years and years and years? Or is it something, a trend that's just happening that needs to be addressed? I see that there's a lot of students that graduated over the years, and, you know, they had their share of behavioral issues, you know, but, you know, I don't know if it's at another level now compared to where I am.
So it's a trend that we're seeing in Lunenburg, but it's a trend that we're seeing everywhere, to the point that the commissioner has made social emotional learning, behavioral health, one of the priorities. So it's not something that's unique to Lunenburg. And those social emotional needs manifest in a different way as the kids get older. Oftentimes, you know, kids are really effective at kind of masking when they're in trouble, emotionally, mentally. Which is why we're trying to get some data, do some screenings, because some of these kiddos, you see them in class, you would never know the turmoil that's going on internally, but it's there. It really is there. And the kids at the middle and high school level, high school particularly, talk about the stress that they're under daily.
But I don't know if it's any more stress than some of the other homeowners and other people working on a day-to-day basis are facing, you know? You know, stress is stress.
Sure. The idea is that there's been a lot of neurobiology research done. We have a better understanding of how the brain learns. And we know that stress of a certain level can be very productive, very motivational, gets kids to do their best and take care of things in a very timely manner.
That's right, if they're motivated.
Stress can be a little bit of a motivator. For some kids, they might be predisposed, and that stress pushes over the line for them. So it's something that we need to pay attention to. And when we identify kids that need these kind of supports, there are different levels, right? So we have an agreement with Interface, and that's something that is available to the entire community, whether you have a child in the schools or not. And people are utilizing that. It helps when people recognize that they need counseling supports or other types of supports. It actually helps accelerate the process to get people seen, because in mental health right now, just to give you a framework for how widespread this is, it can take you 3 to 6 months to get an appointment. So if you're in a very bad place,
You don't have 3 to 6
Do
months.
you think that our students are in that bad of a place? You know, I mean, we got people, we don't have these experts, as you say, in place right now. And
We
got
do.
people,
We do have
and we
some.
have people graduating.
Sure.
So, I mean, how is that handled if you don't have the people?
So
And
we
are
hire-
those people that are graduating having problems?
yeah.
So they're
They
gonna
are.
have problems.
So we try to, again, connect them with services that could provide them support once they leave us. We do have a social worker at the middle high school. We do not have one at the primary Turkey Hill level. That person is helpful directly for the kids, but they also communicate and follow up with the families to make sure that the families are getting the kinds of supports that they need as a family. The stability of the family has a huge impact on a student and their ability to learn. So we know that these things are happening. We know from the science that these emotional states for kids, whether it's being manifest behaviorally or with withdrawal at a high school level, it impacts their ability to learn. It does impact their ability to learn. They are not learning optimally. We need to address those issues simultaneously so that they can actually learn to their best potential.
But it seems like such a bleak forecast that you're giving on the students. There has to be some successful students.
Of course there are.
Yeah.
And I think many of them who feel this way from time to time, knowing that if they're in a not great place, there's somebody at the school that they can go to and confide in, maybe get some counsel, advice, to support them so that they can, again, go on and have a good day. We have our SRO, Officer McNamara, has his own dog that he has trained as a comfort dog. He's in our schools all the time. It's so important that other districts are now trying to replicate the model. We were the first ones to have an SRO with a comfort dog, and that's now happening in school districts around the state. We have people contacting us to figure out how to implement policy, how do you manage taking care of the dog during the day? Like, how does that all work? So the notion that, we have a comfort dog, as an example, last year, we had a child at the primary school level that experienced a significant loss in their life, a death. It's a lot for the little ones to manage, right? People often, focus attention on adults to make sure that they are managing okay, but oftentimes we just assume that the little ones are resilient. They need support too. So to have somebody like Hank, our comfort dog, or to have a school psychologist or a social worker to connect with those children, connect with the family, make sure that they're getting the supports they need to get through something like this. Again, the stability of the family greatly impacts what we can do with a child.
That's the key, yes.
It absolutely is.
Now, the thing is that I want to go on to something else too, is that, why can't, I run a business, and we can grow people within the business. Why can't we get people that are homegrown, or student teachers that could learn different things? And that way there, because if you hire an expert, you really don't know what you're getting. That person might work for you for a year or so and then be gone. You hire somebody and develop them, they have kind of like they owe you in a way, because you're teaching them, you're developing them. I think they're more apt to stay with the program.
So we do have that going on.
And I see that in the town also, that, we're always looking for people, and, we should utilize some of the people that we have available to us from the schools.
We do. It's important to me personally and professionally to support colleagues on their career path, and anybody who's expressed interest in a certain career path, absolutely. We work to grow them within. However, as an example, right now, I don't have a single reading certified teacher in the district. To have somebody homegrown means at least 2 years in a master's program, and then they have to pass the state test to get that reading license. We don't have 2 years to wait to grow for every position. the expertise that we need.
Yeah.
There are positions that we're gonna have to look outside. I
But
can't.
maybe
I can't take a
there are
teacher-
teachers there that are capable of learning that. I mean, there's a lot of self-taught programs, Paulson
so-
Paulson has some self-taught programs that could be used, and there are, that people can learn as they go along, too.
Yep, but there are also licensure requirements that the state has, and we have to make sure that we meet those.
Thank you.
So, we do our best to grow from within when there's interest to grow. But it's not like we could take a second grade teacher and grow them into a school psychologist.
Yeah.
If that's not what they want to do, because that's a very specialized field.
So I mean, you provided me a copy of the strategic plan, and so I do have an idea of what you're referencing, although I'm not as clued in on all the specifics of it, but I think you've highlighted
Come visit me with that one.
but I think you've highlighted a couple things tonight, which is reflected in the 5-year forecast. So the first being that the student population is different. Now, I don't have children, so as a taxpayer, I am a net contributor, which is a great thing for the town. And as Mr. Beardmore mentioned, everyone who sells a home, especially if it's a senior who's moving in, a family, more than likely, or someone who's about to have one. And so as you lose your net contributors in town, the cost of everything goes up. So if you're used to paying $6,000 in taxes, and if that population of school-age kids is 30% of households in the town, as that percentage increases, your taxes will disproportionately increase too. Because right now, you can have 2 kids in school and receive a benefit essentially of $20,000 a year, which is what you get when you have 2 kids in the school system. But if you have less homes without kids in them, it all becomes a lot more costly. And I think that the challenge that we always have in government is that we have to do more than just educate kids. We have a Council of Aging Center that has a budget of $159,000 a year, and that's 30% of the town. We have a library that is, using donated funds to manage parts of their building. So we have needs, I always speak about the Ritter building that we've used as a library and said was unsafe for kids, yet we have half of our staff over there.
We did a renovation of it, to be fair.
That we couldn't afford to do before. But, but we're in a situation where we have people who walk across the street every day. We have buildings that aren't working for everybody. And so we have these unique challenges all over town. And I get the challenges within the school system, but I also think that working in the schools is probably the best work environment if you work for the town of Lunenburg. I don't think any other department's going to say, that they like their work environment compared to the schools. Now, that's not to say that the schools are doing enough, because getting back to what you were saying earlier, is that you're bringing up some really unique challenges, which is, when I was going to school, when I left for the day, I left for the day. If I wanted to see my friends, I could see them if my parents gave me permission, but that's kind of the end of it. Whereas now, all the kids are really interconnected. And so whatever happened in school now becomes the gossip on social media when they go home. And it follows them all weekend long. And so, whereas when we were going through schools, even 15 years ago, you could separate from all that stuff. Whereas now, you can't. So schools have to be able to do more to manage the needs of their population because the population has changed. And try taking a cell phone away from a 13-year-old.
Oh, yeah.
Good luck.
We're very familiar.
And they're all begging for them by the time they're 6, 7 years old. I get it. So, I think you also have another challenge where I've yet to meet one teacher who thinks that they are fairly compensated. Never. And I have a lot of friends who are teachers.
I felt I was fairly compensated, so you've met one.
I'll say current
Again, the demands
teacher.
have shifted.
Because
Yep.
I think that what you also have is, when my first semester of college at Worcester State, not living there, was $2,500. And that was 20 years ago. And now that same school, is $25,000 a semester. A year. So, you're going to a state school now and getting all this debt. And then with the unfunded mandates, what most people don't realize is that every teacher has to get a master's degree.
Yep.
And that's more money that they have to spend on an education that they're told is going to pay them back for it, but the money's not there and they never get paid back. So the teachers want more money because they have more bills, and I get that. And they also want to live probably in the towns that they work in. So I think, I'm speaking lengthy here, but I'm saying that I think that all this is really complex.
Yes.
And as you present your 5-year forecast, you're accounting for all these things. And I think the challenge that I'm hearing tonight is, first of all, I think we need to do more for the seniors. And so I'm probably more willing to say that we got to pour more money into the other 30% of the town that we're not giving a lot of resources to at all. And there are people who've been here for 30, 40 years, and we're really not doing enough for them as they get into the senior years. To me, that's really high priority to resolve. But we also have a challenge of finding more money. And we have to think outside of the box, that we're used to. We have commercial property, we have industrial property, where you get taxes from there. We don't have a lot of that property here in Lunenburg. You get new homes every year. You hope that the senior housing, so that way you don't have as many kids moving in the school system. But reality is, we have to look at new ways of finding income within our town. Some of it is reorganization within government, for sure. I know that there are challenges when you have unions that you can only, humble servants aren't always so humble. So, I get that. But we have to find challenges, and we have to rise to the occasion of finding new sources of revenue. Towns have to do things differently. And there's a lot of great examples all over the country of how we can do this. But I'm hearing that really is the challenge for us. We got to find more money. If we want to meet the needs of today, we have to find more money. And it cannot come from property tax.
Right.
We need wealthy benefactors.
We got to win the lottery.
Isn't that what they had in the olden days? All the buildings were named after
I don't
someone?
disagree with everything that you just said.
Okay, thank you. Sorry for being so long-winded there, Mr. Woods.
Not a problem. Dave Passio, 56 Whiting Street. I again caution not getting hung up on one particular portion or part of the overall picture here. The 5-year forecast, in my eyes, is, from both sides of the fence, town side and school side, is advocating for the needs of those departments, those children, and as actually the DPW director is here this evening, so I hope he'll agree with the comment I make next. Mr. Otterkuns, when he's giving his presentations, he more or less says the same thing. This is what I believe we need. This is what we really need, but whatever you give us, we'll make it work. And I think that's what this 5-year forecast is. It's a snapshot of what we really think we need to provide the services, but we understand that when the dollar amount or that number comes out, we'll do the best we can to do what we think we need to do here with the money you give us in any given year. So that's a comment there. The other thing I thought of, Mr. Jeffries, while you were talking about other sources of revenue and things like that, another very strong theme I heard from a number of town administrators, finance committee members, and across the board, there were municipal representatives there as well as state over the weekend, is that many cities and towns are looking at infrastructure improvements to spur development, especially commercial development, to help with their tax base. Yeah, they say, we really don't have the money to do this, but we have to do it if we want to grow in the ways that we're going to bring in more revenue. Thank you.
Are there any final comments from the public? I guess that's probably the end of the public meeting then, wouldn't you think? Okay, do we have any Minutes, warrants, action items?
Not tonight.
Well, and
Nothing?
before we move on, I would just say, since I've started following as a citizen and now, just even all the conversation seems like heading in the right direction, because there was such a disconnect between the school budget, like I think our first public commenter talked about, and having that disconnect usually seemed to lead to some type of animosity or misunderstanding. So even if it's all out there and it doesn't feel comfortable, it's a lot easier to get to a place where everybody understands what the compromise is when the budget comes out. For example, the superintendent was talking about the school resource officer. That's the topic that drove me into learning about town government. That's a position I advocated for endlessly, and I just went from meeting to meeting to meeting, and I was like a broken record. And now it's involved.
Not you, gee.
Believe it or not, I'm a broken record on more than one topic. I think of something and I stick to it. And now it's evolved into something that's so important to the schools and the therapy dog, et cetera. And the nuance that came to my mind is that's funded by the police department. And so it's something so important for the school. It's a huge asset and something important. And then town money is going to the police department to provide that service. And so it all really is interconnected.
When we work together, it works.
And so if we made cuts on the police department, that might be the position that's cut. So when we look, it's all very much going to matter to continue to talk together, because you don't want to see if, okay, we have to fund over here, so we're going to cut this. Well, what's cut might actually inadvertently negatively impact, an outcome somewhere else. So I think this is all heading in the right direction. So
We're all connected.
bravo, all of us.
And there was also, there's two comments I want to add to that, because I think that's absolutely dead on. One of the challenges, when we're going to pretend that the school is half the budget, just for the purpose of this conversation, to make it easy with my mathematics here. If the school is asking for a 4% increase, and if they are half the budget, off the top, that is a 2% budget increase. And so we only have, right, is my math correct on this? I think it is, right? 4% increase going to half the budget, that's a 2% overall increase. Yes. So that means you have 0.5 for everybody else. And that, I think, is where, I think we have prioritized, in my view, the schools. Now, one thing that, I asked for last week, I think it was last week, maybe it was 2 weeks ago, was for a facility assessment of this building. And I want to share with you something that came up in that review, because it was emailed to us. I did a tour. I'm doing tours of all town buildings. So when I went up into the attic of this building a few months ago just to take a look. So number one, you can see outside. Multiple spots around the attic. You can very clearly see outside. Right above the front of the building is rotting structural supports. Rotting structural supports in the front of this building. Below this building, Mr. Rodriguez can probably speak to this, it looks as if we've had a couple of different floods. I think there were sewer backups or something happened in the basement some years back. What I'm getting at is that we always have more needs than we have money for. And it's always going to be challenging, I think, to try to say, we never want to say your needs aren't important, but we can't let things go for so long that we go into the seat of our government and go in the attic and can look outside, right? I mean, that to me is negligent on a whole nother level for too long. And, and yes, it's an old building, and I'm not pointing fingers and saying it's fault. It's our fault for not allotting enough money for some of the basic things that we need. And part of, I think, this conversation, this 5-year forecast, it's a realistic plan based on what we're currently doing. But we need to change what we're doing, because it's not adequate. It's not enough. And, I think that I heard, I ran for office, not that this is about politics, because none of us are here to, make any money off of this. But I ran for office saying that we need more money. We need more money. It's in order to get these things done, I don't have all these goals about how to spend it, but I have a lot of goals about how we can make it. And that, to me, I think, is the challenge that we're all facing now, is how do we get our town in the next several years to shift gears on how we deal with revenue. And thank you for your very thorough, to the superintendent, assessment of what's going on and the needs of the school committee as well. And thank you as well, Mr. Beardmore, for your passionate explanation. I'm sure you were tempted to mention my name too at the beginning, but you said I'll hold back. He wasn't as aggressive last week.
I'd like to thank all of the public that commented. Would you like another comment?
Thank you, Beth. Carla, I may have dozed off, but I don't remember us talking about the capital plan.
We did not.
Oh, so is that coming up?
That was I think that's up to what
'Cause
people.
I only heard queued up for the 5 years, so I was thinking the capital was coming.
Yep, sure. We can talk about the
Still-
capital
still
plan.
fine? Yeah. Great, thank you. Okay. I have a few questions, and just for reference, I took the capital plan proposal that was submitted, and I went back and pulled out the 5-year plan that was done last year, 2019 through when, actually, I think it was a 10-year plan. It went beyond 5 years, just to see where we were and to recalibrate. And it raised some questions in my mind. And I'd just like to go through a couple. One of them is education, and I'm glad that Jack is here, because the first education is what is a trackless and attachments? Just, what is that? Trackless?
I can't hear you very well.
Trackless? What is a trackless? And attachments for $170,000? I don't know.
Okay. That has many functions. One is plowing the sidewalks. The one we have is, I'm thinking 10 to 13 years old. There's major concern about the sidewalks, and we just picked up 7,000 more feet on Summer Street. So the plan is to get a new one. The old one is a maintenance issue. And when it does expire, we won't be coming to this group or any group with our hand up saying we can't plow, we need one. So it's a preemptive strike.
Good, all right. So and just for that we're pulling that in a couple of years. That was in '22, but that's okay. Maybe you know about this one too, Jack. The senior center reconfiguring the front entrance. That was in the plan for 2022. Has something happened that makes that more urgent?
Yeah, we felt if that's not, what's happening there is causing more and more damage to the front entry, and the damage is moving into the center itself. So every year, that's why you see some sheetrock being repaired and painted. And we felt, and it was agreed, when we went around with this capital plan, we didn't make it up all ourselves, the facilities manager and myself and the town manager, but rather we went to the principals of each building and asked for their input. So some things did change priorities based on what they felt should happen and not simply what I felt. Or it's a together between the committee, the town manager, the person who spends most time in the building, for instance, that would be Mrs. Doherty, and ourselves and the facilities manager.
Great. And is it similar scope? Because this is good news to me, because it was in the plan for 80,000 and now it's in for 24. So is this everything, or is there still going to be something that has to be done on that front entrance?
When it was in for a higher amount, it didn't seem viable. We were actually going to put some canopies out front, and we were going to do the ADA. Now, we've eliminated the canopy, and the ADA will come under another program at the appropriate time.
Thank you, Jack. That's good news. We save some money, maybe. The next one, and maybe again, Jack, maybe you know this one too, hopefully, it's facilities. It's the public safety carport reconfiguration. This was in the prior plan for 2022. If we can pull it forward, great, and if it's important, but could you explain what that is? Because that's, in the 2022 plan, it was $25,000. In this year's plan, it's been pulled in, and now it's $135,000. So I'm wondering what the difference in scope of those two things are, and what is it doing? It seems like a very expensive carport.
I really wish the chief was here. He's on fire about this and has been since the building was constructed. It shouldn't be any surprise to anybody who looks at the buildings, has visited the buildings with the eye towards what we got for our value, which was extremely poor. And it has been a maintenance issue since the day we took it over. Things like loose wires in the attic and an incomplete heating system. And one of the things that has bothered the chief the most, and again, I go to their input, was the canopy. I don't know if you're familiar with it, some may be. Out in the rear of the building, there's what we would probably call a carport, steel beams, and being on the north side of the buildings, it wasn't attached to the building appropriately. It has leaked, forms ice dams, and has been a terrible maintenance issue. We've also expanded what's in there. We've expanded it to more towards the fire side, because there's a space there where people also park. And there's also an engineering and a procurement component in here, whereas we've, I especially have had difficulty with our facilities people trying to grasp at numbers, trying to get the best deal we can for the community, and that's sort of jumped up and bitten me in my back. So now with projects like this and projects of a certain value, we now employ a consultant who gives us specifications and will at the appropriate time take care of the procurement for such. So we'll get a more realistic number on everything that he attaches.
And my understanding as well on this one is that it's expanding the parking lot too. That because am I correct in that? That's part of it.
That's not under the
That's what's
carport?
expanding. Yes, that's on the front side of the building.
I'm not aware of that. I know he has some heady plans about the building that's in front of our building.
Yeah.
But that's probably another whole conversation.
If you look, it's in the capital planning document, on one of the slides, it shows drawn out
Okay.
specification. It's in the rear of the building. It's to expand the coverage area.
Yeah, it's a coverage area as it is. To the front, obviously, we have it's not our property, and to the rear, there's ledge outcroppings. So pretty difficult to go in either direction that way, so we're going horizontally to cover more of the equipment.
So, Jack, it sounded like the, I'll call it carport that's there now, has some issues. So is that going to get fixed too in this, and is that part of what's making this new, it's not just an extension, it's also dealing with some other issues with the carport?
It's a whole redesign,
Of that.
reconfiguration,
Okay.
specifications, how it attaches to the building.
Right.
It was done improperly.
Yeah.
It will not only be done properly, but it will be expanded as well,
So
with a set of actual plans and the whole bidding component.
Okay. So it's addressing that, the current plus the new,
Correct.
so it's, great. So
Same-
that makes more sense.
Yeah.
Got it. Thank you, Jack.
Okay.
The other one that was interesting was in the library carpet. I don't know, Jack, if you know anything. It was scheduled for 2023 at $75,000, and now we've got it in for $126,000 this year. And I'm wondering why the pull-in and why is it so much more? Do you know, by any chance?
At the risk of being redundant, the current librarian, that was his top priority, and those were weighted very, very heavily as they came to me to present to the capital planning committee. What am I missing here? The carpet tiles, right?
Yeah, it's a shift to tile.
Yeah, the shift to the tiles. I'm not sure about that first number, but what we're going to do now is eliminate moving the books, and we're going to take up the existing carpet and install carpet tiles. So it can be done, from what I understand, architecturally right around the many shelves and the many books, so it eliminates entirely the the moving of the books, which is around $35,000. Yeah.
Thank you, Jack. My only other comment on the capital plan is the next two, which is not, thank you, Jack. Yeah, I'm set, this is a comment. The two things for the Ritter building, I know this was mentioned at a prior meeting I was at, the kitchen remodeling and the RDA ramp design, which I understand is not required, that it is RDA accessible but not convenient. Those two items for $37,000, I have to question whether we should be putting $37,000 into the Ritter building at this particular time for a ramp that is not actually needed or nobody's complaining about access.
I've been complaining about access to the Ritter building.
And a kitchen, remodeling the kitchen for a building that we really don't know what we're going to do with for $37,000. So my only other comment, thank you.
I've advocated for I'm not sure, I was not part of this capital request, but I certainly have advocated for the part of the ADA requirements so that, it's called, I'm not sure, I'm blanking on the actual term that it's referred to, but it's, the idea is that people should be able to come into the front door of every building, regardless of their mobility issues. And the current setup at the Ritter building is that you have to go through a side door that's on the other side of a conference room in order to get in, which means someone else has to be with you in order to knock on the main door to let someone know to unlock the side door or to open it. And what I'm getting at is it becomes this really complicated thing, and I, as I understand it, the goal here is to be able to get people to be able to come in the door. At this time, we don't have a plan to vacate the Ritter building, I think, so we have to move forward with what we got.
Okay, on that comment of capital money, not knowing where to spend it because no decisions have been made on a variety of buildings, I asked a question directed towards Heather last week, but I think the right people are here to maybe answer my question. TC Passios, we all know, has a lot of needs, and right now it's being, there's a building committee and looking into its future or non-future, and but that being said, the extended day program's currently there, and I know I read in the Ledger that children receiving state vouchers would no longer receive them because the state didn't deem that building to meet the criteria of a daycare. What I was hoping to find out, and maybe the answers are available, what was it, where is it that the building doesn't meet the needs, and are those needs that we can meet or should be looking into just for the sake of the safety and compliance of the kiddos that are there?
If I may, I did send out a response.
It's not a facility issue per se. There are new training requirements, even for 15-year-olds who work as staff in the program, would be required to complete training through the Department of Early Education and Care. So we provide training here on site in district. That's not satisfactory. We would have to have all of our staff, even the 15-year-olds who work one day a week, trained through the office in Boston. Another example.
They would have to go to Boston for the training?
Okay, so I understand, so it's not
It wouldn't be here on
a
site.
capital item, so that answers
not
the
a capital-
question.
well,
But that being said, I
little
know
bit.
there's high levels of lead water, and we've seen other items come through, so even if that's not associated with the extended day program, officially through that voucher circumstance, I still voiced concern that we are utilizing the building and there's zero money being allocated, and the Vertex trials identified $2 million worth of immediate needs, and those are listed, immediate needs were defined as a complete failure or a safety hazard. So we have $2 million worth of complete failures or safety hazards in that building. The one I bring up frequently is high levels of lead water, just because, using it for children. There's a path where it might be used differently. Maybe it will be demoed someday. Maybe it'll be converted to a town hall. Hopefully it won't. Sorry, that's personal opinion. But that being said, looking at the capital plan, where we address needs that Ritter has now, but may not always need them, I just felt like maybe a little bit of consideration should be given to the the important use of that building and seeing if there's maybe one project that we can do that helps the usability of it.
So relative to the water, the extended day program, even through summer camp, the early learning center, there's bottled water that we bring in, there's a refrigerator. So
Okay.
we're not,
Are all the bubblers like decommissioned and such?
throughout the building, there are several that are not accessible. They've been shut off, right? The other thing is that we've seen the same sort of phenomenon happening at the Turkey Hill. It's an older building. But we know that with certain protocols, the levels of lead are decreased. So what we do in practice, every day, any of the fixtures, we run the water for a flush of the line for at least 30 seconds.
Who conducts that? Is there like a point person?
So there are locations in classrooms, so the classroom teacher would assume that responsibility. If there's a water fountain nearby, the teacher would assume that, but that's something that we've been doing all of last year and this year as well. Obviously, we weren't utilizing TCP for the extended day program or the early learning center a year ago.
So I guess
But
my
all those
question is, do
protocols
you
are in place.
identify, or would you hope for any capital improvement given its current use? Like, I did a lot of work on student safety and security, and helped get surveillance cameras at the Turkey Hill after an incident, but also at the new primary. That school doesn't have any type of security. And so are there needs that we should, as we look at these things like carpet, does that building have a need that we should address in the interim? Or would you hope for anything?
There are many needs. I think something that we've had conversation about more recently would be a little bit of surveillance around the building.
Which we do have planned, where in this year's budget, that's an earmarked item in our facilities budget for security.
Right. And that building is secure, so you have to buzz to get in. So that does exist. From time to time, we have our challenges with that, and it needs to be adjusted. It's an older system, but it's functioning. I think probably the most significant challenge is relative to the roof. You know, we've had children access the roof. So.
You mean in terms of vandals on the exterior?
And that was, I believe, the largest component of those immediate repairs was the roof, because the roof is at its life expectancy. And what the capital planning committee did when they reviewed, because those projects are in the capital plan, they are looking for next year to look at building envelope from that point of view for the Vertex property condition. How do we keep our building envelopes tight and making sure we maintain our buildings in that lens?
It was requested, I can see that, they requested $2.2 million for the TCP building, and the...
Doing zero.
Zero, yes.
I just as a point of, what, if we are constantly in a position where we don't know what we're doing, so we do nothing, but we continue to use them, I especially with things like surveillance cameras and having had an incident at a pickup at a different school, there's certain things that I think even if it's not logical long-term, is there logical short-term as we look at things like carpet. I just wanted to point out we're spending no money on that building, but it's used and actually it's used in a program that generates revenue, ironically. So I just didn't know if there was anything we could do to make it a better environment in the immediate future in this capital plan.
The money that's generated through the program helps fund the expense of that building as well.
Yep.
So,
No, I know, but the program itself generates revenue because it's extended break. I know a lot about these things.
No, but
I don't need to be corrected. I'm just saying that the learning program is a revenue generating. It's not like the rest of education where I drop off my kids and tax money pays for it. You actually pay to send your children there.
Yeah. I think what she was saying is that having people in a building costs money, though.
Right.
I know that. That's not what I said, though, but we have a...
Come on up.
Thank you, I appreciate it. I know it's getting late. Peter Beardmore, 282 Pleasant Street. I brought this up at the Finance Committee meeting last week, and I just want to bring it to your attention. I would imagine it'll come up at town meeting if these lines remain as part of this recommendation. When we made the decision to build the new library, we went through a process of evaluating build versus renovate. And amongst the things that we looked at the Ritter building was ADA accessibility, the heating system, lead paint. I mean, there's a long list of things. And there was no reutilization plan for that building, but part of the justification for building versus replacing, and there were lots of justifications, included ADA compliance. And the ink wasn't dry on the certification of that capital expenditure that we decided to move the land use departments in that direction. And we put in a new heating system, and we spent money on ADA compliance, and we repainted the building, and we dropped a lot of money in that building. And here we find ourselves 15 to 20 years down the road, and we're having another discussion about, to Mr. Jeffrey's, stated goals, to consolidate town offices and potentially move them to TC Passios. And simultaneously, we're talking about spending money on that building to better the municipal use of that building, where we don't have a reutilization plan earmarked for that building. So it seems to me like the cat's kind of chasing its tail on the Ritter building a little bit. And, it's not comparatively a lot of money. It's $37,500. But, I think Mrs. Adams is scratching on an issue that, is probably worth taking a look at, and perhaps even having a conversation with the building committee, which is, are there expenditures that we could potentially make in that neighborhood that would be additive and, to whatever they're working on? And I don't know. I know very little about the planning for TC Passios, but, and I totally sympathize with your point, Ms. Jeffries, around ADA compliance. I get that. But again, this is an issue that we thought we addressed when we replaced that building, and here we are again, looking to replace that building and throwing money at ADA compliance. It just, to me, it seems like we should be a little smarter about the use of those limited resources. Thank you.
Yeah, I fully understand where you're coming from, and I don't wholly disagree with you. I mean, I think it's unfortunate that we have found ourselves in a position where we've been using the Ritter building for over a decade, and we haven't resolved the abundantly clear problem that, town halls were meant to be one building that housed your government, and that's the historical purpose, that's the historical use of a town hall. And now we have Annex A and Annex B and Annex C, and we don't seem to have a plan yet of how we're going to consolidate them into one building. So we're still asking our employees to go from one building to the next, use 3 buildings for government, and heaven forbid if you're new to Lunenburg and don't know where to go and have a walking problem because you're really going to be up a creek.
Okay, without the nuance of getting stuck in the building conversation, but it does tie into capital planning, which is why it's bubbling to the surface. The Vertex studies, which were done a few years ago now, at least 2 years ago now, the buildings that, out of the 5 studied, which actually 7 were eventually studied, but the 5 that were presented on, Town Hall did the best, 12% it earned, and then the building that fared the next best in terms of its current capital setup was the Ritter. So the buildings that fared the best in that extensive investigation were Town Hall and Ritter. Good news is that we got Complete Streets grants. It's going to be better sidewalks between the 2 buildings if indeed we did continue to use the buildings we had. The TC Passios, I asked questions about it. I don't think that's the right direction. In terms of ADA compliance, every single door in the entire building, classroom-wise, is not ADA compliant for wheelchairs, et cetera. So the building, the situations that condemn the use of one building also condemn the use of the other. We just have to pick a path and then upgrade those spaces.
We're trying to stick to the
These are capital,
plan.
it is. It's all
Okay,
capital.
let's get to the point.
It is the point.
Can you summarize the point?
The point is that we can't spend money on all the buildings not knowing what we're gonna do. And we pick a path and then we can stop wasting our money. Like the previous speaker said, some of these things happened 15, 20 years ago and we're doing them again. And one path or another, I might not agree with one direction or another, but we've not picked a direction, and that's why it's so confusing. We're continuing to utilize all these spaces and try to meet modern needs without making a choice. We're taking care of far more square footage than we need.
And, I know several speakers agreed with you about the Ritter, that it may not be a good use of money to spend money on ADA and the kitchen in the Ritter.
That's not at all anything of what I just said. But when we talk about the topic, I like to go back to facts, and the facts were that there's the least amount of capital needs in Town Hall and Ritter overall. But as we talk about these buildings, we're spending money in buildings, and ultimately one or the other will be left. And so it's every time we do a capital plan, it's very confusing because we're trying to meet needs of buildings that we know we don't need all of them. But I think it's highly relevant.
I see what you're saying, Ms. Adams. One of the challenges that we always have is that, the schools have parents who can advocate for the needs of the teachers. They have, teachers who can advocate for themselves. But the rest of our government, has the town manager, and the town manager is structured in such a way that that position reports to this board. So we are the only advocates for our employees who don't work in the school department. And, I think that, we have to, I hear what you're saying, and I don't disagree with you fully, but I think that the path forward is that we do have to listen not just to, outside sources, but we have to listen to the people who we employ and hear what they have to say. And my conversations with town employees, overwhelmingly, they speak to the problems with these buildings. They speak to, the health concerns about working here in Town Hall. They speak to the health concerns about being in Ritter Building. I mean, these are...
There's lead water in TCP.
They are.
You know
I'm
what?
saying that these are
Really,
issues
I think
that everyone speaks about.
we're going far afield from the point of
We
the
have a
meeting.
citizen here.
Yes.
Hi, Steve Weaver, 288 Holman Street. I think that, we shouldn't be spending the money. And the reason for that is there's so much indecision. Nobody can make up their mind on what they want to do. We got buildings just sitting here, rotting away, not doing anything. People make suggestions. It's brought up at town meeting. It gets passed about demolition, non-binding, but still, the building's still standing. People are very frustrated about this, that we're not going in certain directions. The lead water, that's been ongoing for years, and nobody's really addressing it. We're flushing it out. There has to be a solution to it. The people that built the building must have some type of responsibility as far as putting those bubblers in there if they're generating this lead. I just see it all as a time bomb waiting. Mr. Jeffrey said, this building is falling apart, and I know that Ms. Adams has said that, there are other places that we could hold the meetings that are ADA
Compliant.
efficient. So, I think that, we should be looking outside the box in some of these things and trying to solve the problems as a town and not creating other ones for years and years and years of just sitting there. It's very frustrating.
It is. I think you'll be excited this year. We've already, the one article that we've voted on so far is to add to the warrant, or add to the town meeting, is to tear down the old primary school.
That's wonderful.
That's one. And then I think that we also...
That's a long time coming, and I think that it's something that's well needed, and I think that, if the town makes the effort to do that, I think that a lot of the other townspeople behind this would really step up to the plate, and maybe even help out in some ways, There are different companies around, there are different, organizations around, Lions Club might buy the gazebo, you never know. So I think that, there's an awful lot of pluses from it. So I think that you're right on target about this.
Okay, is there anything to add to the discussion of the 5-year forecast in the FY '21 capital plan? Any last comments from the public? From the board on topic?
I find that insulting. I think discussing building needs is exactly what a capital plan is. I think it's highly on topic.
No, I think this was a robust discussion tonight. Thank you all for coming here. I know that it's not always easy to sit through these meetings. Certainly on this side, it's not either. But it's definitely, I think, a great thing that, it's always surprising to me to hear who's watching at home, because you never really know, and you kind of think that that no one's really paying attention.
That we're just talking to ourselves.
And then you go online to YouTube and see that the next day there's 50 views of our meetings, and it's like, really? Wow. So I think it's a really good thing that, we can differ, and I think one good positive, and Selectman Adams and I were talking about this outside of a meeting, is that you can take people sometimes that are on different viewpoints, and over time, you can find a way to work together. And it's all of our community, and we can be passionate about our individual beliefs, and that's what I think we're supposed to be. But in a democracy, which we're all here as active participants in, we understand that it's a slow grind. But so long as we keep moving forward, we're moving in the right direction.
Okay. Any more comments? There are no minutes, warrants, or action items?
I have some action items.
Okay.
Just a couple things I wanted to bring up to maybe add to a future agenda. One, a discussion on earth removal permitting. I feel like I had a lot of thoughts that came out of our last meeting. And I don't know if anybody followed the planning board meeting. Last night there was a hearing that continued on the topic of the stormwater on the site where the earth removal permit was approved. And there are some concerns that site might be an area of critical environmental concern, which is a state-based circumstance that has more to do with habitat. And it also is in either a Phase 3 or Phase 2 of a watershed protection area. And I was really adamant that I wanted to delay the hearing so that I could get some professional input from the municipality and the land use department. At one point, the applicants laughed at me when I was pleading for that. And then watching today, I had the opportunity to watch a segment last night, and Paula on the planning board was raising these concerns and saying, I really want more review and more understanding. And their hearing got delayed as they continue to study the stormwater aspects of the site. And so I would like to discuss, as long as we are the permitting authority, which maybe someday we'll get it into the direction we felt it should head and be with the planning board, but so long as we're the permitting authority, I want to have a discussion about what our process is, and I would always like to include input from land use or from somebody, as we always got with Gary Rhodes. I felt very uninformed on a very big project.
And I agree with you. I felt like there was, since two members of the select board felt that they needed more information, I think it was disrespectful for the board to vote, frankly. And it wouldn't have killed them to have given us a week.
And 75% of the abutters were against or concerned with the project, and I've never seen a hearing where such a high amount of abutters, so that there were 4 residential abutters, and there was a letter, and then 2 were present, and so 75% of the abutters were saying, no, thank you. And I felt like that warranted a little bit more consideration, just for me to sort of be able to learn more and think more about the impact, and then listening to the discussion of the area of critical environmental concern. The engineer who was presenting in that meeting last night was the same engineer that presented to us, and he was unaware that it may be in that area. Because that's a state-based map, so when you go into the town-based GIS, it's not something that overlays, and so they had to investigate it more. And I just thought, okay, they're doing their due diligence, and if we're the permitting authority, how do we be sure that we set up a process for us? I don't want to have to beg for more information.
I think it's a great idea. It's a great idea.
That's one item I'd like to revisit. One, I wanted to check in with public access cable. I used to live stream meetings that, like, you know, we're doing, loading the dishwasher, folding laundry. I can't live stream anymore, and I don't know if there's a process for that, and if there is, if we can make it more widely available. So I don't have cable, so I can't watch it like that. I can go back and watch an old meeting, but they used to live stream through YouTube. So you could go onto YouTube and watch meetings as they were happening, and that went away. And I know technology hasn't decreased, so I'm just wondering where those went, so if we could get a little input on that. And then I wanted to follow up and see if we're going to have a discussion of the outcome of the open meeting violation results for the Conservation Commission. The Attorney General came back with their ruling that they had violated open meeting law, and they always break it down into intentional versus non-intentional, and they said it was an intentional violation of open meeting law. And even though we've already gone through the process of studying the event from our end, I just, because we appoint the Conservation Commission, would like an agenda item where we talk about the outcome of the Attorney General's ruling and how we might want to discuss it and think about what occurred at that meeting and how we move forward, since we appoint members there. So I didn't know if that was going to be an agenda item to discuss that.
If we do that, I would recommend that that's an executive session in the event that we
But it was an open meeting law violation, so I'd like to discuss it openly.
No, I certainly don't see a conflict with both, but I think that there are some things that we cannot discuss in open session, especially if it gets into specific people.
Oh, I'm not talking about things that already happened, but just moving forward with boards that we appoint and how we want to navigate things. It was just a thought I had after I read the email. So those were just sort of action items or thoughts.
Anyone else? Any other action items? Okay, upcoming meeting schedule, event schedule. We'll be meeting on February 4th, February 11th. The town manager will be presenting the budget to the Finance Committee on the 13th. We'll be meeting on the 18th. If there are no, public comment, come on up. Everybody's still smiling at least.
Dave Passios, 56 Whiting Street, also a member of the TC Passios Redesign Committee. I just want to remind everybody that tomorrow evening here in this room, we will be interviewing the 3 entities that returned RFQs for the design and engineering project for that building, and that will be televised. Thank you.
What time is that?
6 o'clock.
6 p.m.
6 p.m. televised. Thank you. We adjourn the meeting first before we make a motion to go into executive session or not?
No, your motion will include that you'll adjourn from executive session.
All right. I'll entertain a motion to enter executive session pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 30, Section 21, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining, and the chair so declares that an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the negotiating position of the governmental body. Professional firefighters, PFFM, Local 4358A, and AFSCME, Council 93, Municipal Employees Union, and will adjourn after exiting that meeting.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Good night, everyone. Thanks for coming.